Hello, video 3. And this time we are going to do Elizabethan England. And this is the final part or final topic that you're going to answer questions on in your History GCSE exam. It's the second section of the second paper. So you'll be sitting this on the 8th of June. And the question we're going to focus on is one where you can really bank some serious marks, because essentially we've got an idea about what the question might be, and that allows us to put in quite a bit of preparation in terms of what you can know going into that exam. By that I mean that you can essentially have in your mind some potential responses, and we can say with some certainty that these are going to come up in the exam. Now, the question is linked to Hardwick Hall, which is this place study that you have to go in and look at. Now, Hardwick Hall is in Derbyshire. We haven't been, but we don't need to go because we've looked at and studied it in quite some detail. Now, the question you're going to get asked is, or could be asked, it'll be a variant on this, is one of the main reasons for the building of stately homes in Elizabethan times was to show the wealth and status of the owner. How far does the study of Hardwick Hall agree with this or support this? All right. Now, the key bit with this particular question is there could be two things that might change. The first one might be this, where it says wealth and status. That might change to something like awareness of culture. It might show the success of the owner. It might be something related to security or defence. It might be something related to privacy. It could be a variance on that. So that's what it could change. Or it could, the main reasons for building a stately home, or it could be focused instead on how stately homes changed, which might make the questions slightly different. But we're going to cover that in a lesson, so don't worry too much about that. Now, what we would do to start off with this particular question is essentially all you've got to do is have 4 paragraphs. One of them might be a introduction, so you're introducing what happened to build Hardwick Hall, a little bit around Bess of Hardwick's life. Then you're going to outline why Hardwick Hall supports the idea that it was built for the demonstration of the wealth and status of Bess of Hardwick. You're then going to look at how it was built for other reasons. And then you're going to have a conclusion saying overall, what were the reasons why Hardwick Hall were built? Was it to do with wealth and status, or was it to do with other factors? Maybe culture, maybe security, maybe it's something to do with privacy, okay? Or to reflect the layered nature of Elizabethan society. So, introduction. What would we include if we were doing an introduction? Well, you're going to include a little bit of information about when the house was built. Well, it was built in the 1590s. It was something called a prodigy house. It was supposed to leave a legacy of the person who built it. It was built by Bess Hardwick, who known as Elizabeth, also known as the Countess of Shrewsbury, the second most famous Elizabeth in Elizabethan England. She had 4 husbands. Okay, she was born into a gentry family in Derbyshire, but basically gained marriage through wealth and status. Every time she married, she gained a bit more wealth and status. Now, Masuka was talking to me today about how we can compare this to maybe Meghan Markle. Okay, Meghan Markle is about to marry Prince Harry. It's her second marriage. She married a film producer before, which got up to a certain level of fame and notoriety, and now she's marrying a prince. So she's going to become even higher in terms of her wealth and status. And that's what Bess of Hardwick did. Every time she married up the social ladder. So by the time she has her 4th husband, she is in high position in society. She's entered the nobility. She's got her title as a countess. And she wants to show it off. She wants to demonstrate to the world around her that, listen, I've made it. You know, through hook or by crook or by 4 marriages, I have made it to the top. And the house is designed to show off her wealth. So that's what the points I'll be really hammering home in that introduction, outlining why it was built because of wealth. But what I then do is I'd say, maybe it's not because of wealth. Maybe it's because of other reasons. Maybe it's because it was built to show the stability of the Elizabethan era. Remember, the Elizabethan era was one of the first eras in English history where there was no internal conflict, where there was no external threat with a likelihood of invasion. You could also say that it was built because of a wider increase in prosperity of the gentry. It could also argue that it was built in order to show off a renewed sense of culture, part of the English Renaissance, which spread from Italy in the early 1600s and late 1500s. So you'd outline what potentially could have been the reasons for the building of Hardwick Hall in that introduction. So I'd start off with, just to summarise, Bess of Hardwick built in the 1590s to show off her success after marrying 4 times and entering the nobility. However, it could be that it was built to reflect the stability of the Elizabethan era, or it could be built to reflect the increased awareness of culture in terms of architecture and art. Right, so that's your introduction. The first paragraph is going to be, it's basically saying why Hardwick Hall was built for wealth and status. So what evidence is there that Hardwick Hall was built to show off its wealth and status? So you'd start off by saying something like, well, the design of the building demonstrates the wealth and status of its owner, okay? And this is where you have that phrase that I hear from every student, which means it's clearly stuck in our minds. Hardwick Hall, more glass than wool, all right? Hardwick Hall, more glass than wool. Now, why does that have any significance? Well, glass was an expensive building material. It wasn't produced in factories like it is today. Most of it was handmade. And in fact, Bess of Hardwick had her own personal glassmaker, all right, make the glass that went into Hardwick Hall. And by having so much glass in Hardwick Hall, because if you look at the front of it, it is covered by windows as well as the back and sides. By having so much glass, it demonstrated the wealth of Bess of Hardwick. Now that's a really easy point to remember, because Hardwick Hall, more glass than wool, is a nice one to stick in your brain. The second what thing you would then do is actually say, well, maybe glass is prosperity, showing off wealth and status, but however, it could be something else. It could be something to do with stability. So you keep on talking about the glass in the windows, but what you would do is you'd evaluate your point about it being around wealth and status. You'd instead then argue, actually, what it could be about is stability. Because if you think about it, if you've got lots of glass windows, you're not especially expecting an attack, because glass necessarily isn't the best material to have if you're trying to build a fortress, which clearly they weren't, because of the stability of the Elizabethan regime. So that's sort of your first bit of evidence, and then you've evaluated it. The second bit you could say is you could argue that Bess of Hardwick had 14 initials, ES, put all around the building. Now, that's a pretty big, bold statement about your own wealth and prosperity, okay? Think about celebrities and having their own name and brands. You know, people have their own perfumes. People have their own brands of clothing. And part of that is to demonstrate their wealth and status to others. And the Elizabethan version of that, I guess, was to have your own initials put on your house. ES. That's a clear demonstration of the wealth of a particular owner. Another bit of information you could argue that reflects the wealth of the owner is that each floor of Hardwick Hall got higher as the stories went up. So the bottom floor was quite low, the middle floor was slightly higher, and the top floor was even higher still. And that reflects the status of the people who tended to occupy those floors. So the servants tend to occupy the lower floor. There'll be a middle floor where it might be the day-to-day running of the hall, and then the banqueting halls and the main entertainment suites, so where people were being entertained and where best showed off, was the top floor, which had the highest ceilings. Now that reproduces Elizabethan society at the time, which was very structured and very layered. Equally, though, you could argue that that gave best more privacy, so you could evaluate the idea around the different levels of ceiling by saying that it equally gave best more privacy or reflected the original nature of Elizabethan society. So that's your second paragraph, where you deal with the idea around wealth and status. Now, the third paragraph, you're going to be looking at, well, what other reasons could it have been built? Now, one reason it could have been built was to show off how cultured Bess of Hardwick was. Now, there's several ways you could do this. You could explain the fact that she employed the leading architect of the time, a guy called Robert Smithson. And that Smithson spelled Smythson. And he was able to design the building in the latest Italian Renaissance style, showing off the culture. Now, there's several elements of Hardwick Hall which support that. The loggia at the front, which is sort of that walkway at the front of the building, which has arches, and then there was additionally some friezes, some portraits, some landscapes, pictures running along the back of it, which demonstrates the culture that Elizabeth of Hardwick had. The Long Hall and Highgate Chamber had several portraits, some of Bess of Hardwick, some of her family members, but also some of Elizabeth. Now, this could be to show awareness of art and culture. But then again, you could evaluate it and say that actually no, the portraits of Elizabeth I could be to show her loyalty to the Elizabethan regime, to Elizabethan Queen, as another alternative explanation for why Hardwick Hall could have been built. Now, you could also argue that in the Long Hall, these portraits of Bess and her husband hung. Now, this is to try and encourage the idea that her wealth went back generations and wasn't new. This Long Hall, remember, was where entertainment was hosted. So they had badminton games in this Long Hall as well. So that could be another reason why Hardwick Hall was built. But equally, you could say that there was a desire for greater privacy by having lots of rooms. You could also argue to support the point about culture, in that there were statues of mercy and justice to illustrate an awareness of that side of culture, but that also reflects Elizabethan society as well. And after you've outlined some of those alternative points of view, you could then have a conclusion, which would be your fourth paragraph. Overall, what do you think is the most important reason why Hardwick Hall was built? Was it built to show off the wealth and status of their owner? Or was it done for other reasons? The key is there to have an appraisal of what you've just written in the rest of the essay and come to some sort of conclusion. It doesn't matter what you really say at the end, as long as you make a point and it's shown that you're using evidence from the rest of your essay to back that up. So that's the Hardwick Hall essay. There's a really good model answer that's been put together and you should have in your books to refer back to. I really recommend that you go and look at that. And a key tip for this particular question is to almost just memorize some of the paragraphs so that when you get into the exam, you can answer this really quickly to start off with. And this will give you a real boost going into that second section of the paper 2. And you can already get some key marks banked going forward into the next rest of the paper. Okay, so thanks for listening, thanks for watching, and I'll see you all soon.